What's the hardest decision a parent could ever make? My 4-year-old daughter Daniela came into the kitchen crying after preschool and said, "Daddy, I don't want to go to school anymore. They keep punching my belly." I immediately knelt down and saw real fear in her eyes. She was holding her belly, and my wife Ruby rushed over as I gently asked Daniela to explain what was happening at school. She said during nap time someone kept hitting her stomach. It happened almost every day and made her feel sick. When I asked who was doing it, she couldn't say because the room was dark during nap time. The next morning I met with the preschool director, Mrs. Henderson. She seemed genuinely shocked and promised to investigate immediately. They would have a teacher stationed right next to Daniela during nap time and review all their procedures. But Daniela came home that afternoon still complaining about stomach pain. We took her to see Dr. Weber, who did a thorough examination. He found no bruising or signs of physical trauma. Her abdomen felt normal and blood work came back fine. He suggested it might be anxiety or possibly acid reflux and prescribed some mild medication. But I knew my daughter wasn't making this up. Over the next 2 weeks, the preschool insisted no one was touching Daniela. They'd moved her mat next to the teacher's desk and watched her constantly. But she kept coming home with the same story. Ruby and I were at our wits' end trying to figure out what was happening to our little girl. Ruby suggested installing a baby monitor in Daniela's room. Maybe she was having night terrors or sleep disturbances that she was confusing with school experiences. I agreed because we needed answers. We set up the camera without telling either of the kids about it. The first few nights showed nothing unusual. I started leaving the monitor on during the day too when the kids played upstairs. That's when I began noticing odd behavior from our 7-year-old son, Walker. Walker would go into Daniela's room frequently when she was playing. Sometimes he'd just stand in the doorway watching her. Other times he'd get very close to her and she'd push him away. It seemed like normal sibling behavior, but something about his expression bothered me. 5 days after installing the monitor, I was reviewing footage from the previous night. Around 2 a.m., Walker had entered Daniela's room. He stood by her bed, then reached down and punched her in the stomach. Hard. Daniela curled up in her sleep and whimpered, but didn't wake fully. Walker hit her 2 more times before leaving. I felt sick as I called Ruby over. We watched in shock as I showed her multiple instances of Walker hitting Daniela over the past week. Sometimes at night, sometimes during afternoon naps when we thought both kids were sleeping. Our son had been systematically hurting his sister for weeks. We confronted Walker that morning. He denied it until we showed him the video. Then he just shrugged and said he didn't know why he did it. No remorse, no explanation. Ruby started crying while I tried to understand how we'd missed this. Walker had always been a good kid who did well in school and had friends. We immediately made an appointment with Dr. Roberts, a child psychologist. She met with Walker several times that week. He was cooperative but couldn't explain his behavior. He said sometimes he just felt like he had to hurt Daniela. The compulsion would come over him and he couldn't stop himself. Dr. Roberts recommended keeping the siblings separated and possibly medication. She wanted to rule out any neurological issues with brain scans. We implemented strict supervision and door alarms. Walker seemed to understand he'd done wrong, but we caught him trying to sneak into Daniela's room twice more. During this stressful time, I was going through the monitor footage obsessively looking for patterns. That's when I noticed something odd in recordings from several weeks ago. Our cat Pepper appeared in some of the daytime footage in Walker's room. We'd assumed she ran away 2 months ago when she disappeared. I watched Walker playing with Pepper normally at first, but then in footage from early March I saw him picking her up roughly. In another clip, he was pulling her tail while she tried to get away. The last footage of Pepper showed Walker carrying her into his closet. She never appeared on camera again after that. My hands were shaking as I went up to Walker's room. He was at school, and Ruby had taken Daniela to a playdate. I opened his closet and started moving boxes and toys. Behind his sports equipment, I found a small cardboard box sealed with tape. The smell hit me before I even opened it. Inside was Pepper's collar and what remained of her body wrapped in a towel. She'd been dead for weeks based on the condition. I stumbled backward, feeling like I might vomit. Our 7-year-old son had killed our family cat and hidden her in his closet, and we'd had no idea. I called Ruby immediately and told her to keep Daniela away from the house. Then I called Dr. Roberts with this discovery. She said to call the police and not touch anything else. This went beyond normal childhood behavioral issues. Walker had shown calculated violence toward animals, which often escalated to humans. When Walker came home from school, I was waiting with 2 police officers and a social worker. He saw them, and his face went completely blank. No surprise, no fear, just empty. As they explained why they were there, he tilted his head and looked directly at me. "Did you find the other box too?" My eyes went wide. Detective Williams stepped forward immediately and put his hand on Walker's shoulder, while Ms. Garcia pulled out her phone and started making calls. The detective told Walker to stay right where he was, and then looked at the other officer who nodded and headed straight upstairs. I stood there frozen, my brain trying to process what my 7-year-old had just said about another box. Walker sat down on the couch and started swinging his feet back and forth, watching all of us move around him with that same empty look on his face. The detective asked him where the other box was, but Walker just tilted his head and said he forgot, like he was talking about a misplaced toy. Missy Garcia finished her call and told me they needed to treat Walker's room as a potential crime scene and that nobody should go in there until they finished searching. I watched the officers put on gloves and head upstairs while Walker picked at a loose thread on the couch cushion, completely calm like this was just another normal afternoon. They started going through everything in his room systematically, pulling out drawers, checking under furniture and bagging items. I could hear them moving things around up there while Walker hummed quietly to himself on the couch. Missy Garcia sat down next to him with a notepad and started asking him questions about school and friends, but his answers were all short and flat. After about 20 minutes, the detective called down for me to come upstairs but to stay in the doorway. When I got there, they had Walker's whole room torn apart with everything spread out on the floor. Under his bed, wrapped in one of Daniela's old pillowcases, they'd found a shoebox that made my stomach turn. Inside were about a dozen of Daniela's hair ties that we thought she'd lost, several of her drawings that had gone missing from the fridge, and a piece of notebook paper covered in Walker's messy handwriting. The detective held it up so I could read it, and I saw it was a list of rules about hitting Daniela, things like not, when mom is home, and only 3 times, and wait 2 days between. My legs felt weak as I realized my son had been planning and tracking his attacks on his little sister,